like you seriously, if you want to be in this business, you still have to think of yourself as a storyteller. I think a lot of times going into your first job in the broadcast news industry, that a lot of people kind of take themselves a little too seriously, or think they have to be all like super formal, and I'm a journalist now and I'm just going to stand here and tell people the story. And yeah, that's part of it, because you want to be the authority, sort of the source on whatever story or whatever information you're putting out there to the public, but you still are a storyteller. So think about like when you were a kid and your mom or your grandmother or your dad at bedtime, read you a story, and how they captivated you. It's captivating storytelling that gets people to watch the news, believe it or not. And unfortunately, our job is to tell stories, but the reason we're telling good stories is so people watch the news, right? And the reason we want people to watch the news is why? Who are we really working for? The public that's purchasing the advertising on that station. So every day, especially 4 times a year, November is one of the Nielsen rating months, one of the 4 Nielsen ratings time. Have you heard of the Nielsen surveys? So if you're a Nielsen family, they come and put a box on your house, and every time your family turns on television, that box collects data on what station you're watching, how long you're watching it, and when you turn the channel. That's how they rate television news. So back in the day, they used to come to your house and say, would you like to be a Nielsen family? Here's this huge book, and every time you watch television, I want you to write down what you're watching, what channel it was, what time it was, and why you liked it. And people actually participated. Well, now there's a computer that does that, and they literally come and stick it on your cable box on the outside of your house, and it records what you're watching. That's how television news is rated. So we are ending the end of November and ending the end of a very significant ratings period in local TV news. And so on sometime after Thanksgiving, it'll be announced who won the local news wars. Usually KDK is number 1, and it has been for quite some time. But it's also important, they want us to win the 6 a.m. show, the noon show, the 4 show, the 5, 6, they want you to win all across the board. Typically we do, but there's always a chance that someone could sneak up on you. So there's like this November, February, May, and July are like these tension-filled months, more than ever in TV news. So you can't forget that even though you're a reporter and you have no advertising experience, no sales experience, you are still working for people whose job it is to sell you as a storyteller and to sell your newscast to advertisers who then bring money to the station and to the company, right? Okay, so that's kind of a sort of behind the scenes look at the business of news. So a lot of times we'll see people from the sales department or our general manager come in and say, what are you guys working on tonight? And just trying to get a grip on what they think people will want to watch so that they will buy the products that are advertised during that newscast. And of course, during the noon newscast, you can imagine that they advertise different things than they do during the 11 p.m. newscast. Like, do you ever, like during the summer when you're watching soap operas or the noon, game shows at home, it's a lot of like mom products, diapers, babies, food stuff, beauty products, because all those stay-at-home moms are watching the noon news. And then at 11 o'clock at night, there's a lot of car commercials, a lot more guy stuff, some like they'll advertise other shows that are, for late night television. So it's all based on the audience that they believe, that they know is watching that newscast. So that's what we're in the business of doing. So getting into it, is everybody here taking some sort of classes here at the high school that's related to broadcast? Everybody's doing that? And I hear you guys have a pretty awesome TV department too, right? Which is amazing. Take advantage of that. Do as much as you can with that. And if you do decide to, go to a college and major in either broadcast journalism, communications, there's a couple of, depending on which university it is, they call it different things. I have a degree in communications, just basic communications. But now they're a little more specific about it, like broadcast journalism. There's just, different components of that now. And between these high school years and the time you go to college, really start honing those communication skills. Writing is very, very important. We're seeing that a lot of students that are coming in for internships at KDKA and at the other stations are really lacking in writing skills. So you can't forget that either. Just because you're not actually, you're saying what you're writing, so that's equally as important as what comes out of your mouth. And you don't have to be a stickler for grammar and things like that these days on TV news, but you have to be a great writer, which makes you in turn a great storyteller. And it's a difference, there's a big difference in TV news writing than newspaper writing. And the coolest thing about being in this industry is that at any time you can turn on the television or even get online and you can see people in this industry doing their jobs. So you have access to, to examples at the touch of your fingertips. So if you're really serious about it, watch the local news, watch the national news, get online and see what the big news stories of the day are. Always stay up to date on what's going on both locally and in the world so that when you're out, you can talk about that stuff intelligently with people. And you'll know what's going on around you. And then listen and watch how they're telling the stories. Because there's a skill to it, there's an art to it, and everybody has their own particular style. Some people do it with a lot of drama and flair, and that's okay. Some people are a little more subdued. Think CNN, right? CNN, they're not like out there throwing their arms around and hanging onto poles and stuff like that. But, if you watch the Weather Channel, you'll see reporters hanging onto poles in hurricanes. If you watch entertainment news, which is huge these days, you'll see a lot more flair and energy and drama in that. So you have the opportunity at any time to flick on a station or log onto a website and see what people are doing. So start acting like those people. Start doing what they're doing. If you're interested in the video aspects of it, look at what they're shooting. Look at how they're telling the story with the images that they're getting. Okay? And it's there for you. So it's awesome because, if you want to be a doctor, you can't just walk into an operating room, right, and see. But you guys as students who want to advance into careers in broadcasting, you can do that. So when I was talking about the Nielsen ratings, what do you think, do you know where Pittsburgh is ranked, like in the nation, in terms of, you always hear people say, oh, I work in a top 20 market or a top 10 market. Do you guys know, like, what number Pittsburgh is? Anyone want to guess? And it's usually very closely related to population. So number one would be what? New York. 2, LA. 3, anybody want to guess what number 3 would be? Chicago. So it pretty much goes by demographics and population. We are 23. So we're in the top 25, which is a pretty big deal. I work with people who remember when Pittsburgh was in the top 10, believe it or not, like back in the 70s and late 70s, which was probably an amazing time to work in TV news. So Pittsburgh is obviously Pittsburgh went from 10 to 23 for a reason, and that's because of population decline. So I printed out, actually, all of the 206 markets that are in the United States. You want to know what the smallest is? Smallest is a place in Montana called Glendive. Glendive, Montana. Oh, there's actually 210 markets this year. So when I started out, do you know where my first job was? What number? 204. Zanesville, Ohio. Do you know where Zanesville is? It's near Columbus. Do you know where, like, Columbus, Ohio is in the middle of the state? Zanesville's kind of near there. So I grew up in Wheeling, West Virginia. So I wanted to stay local. So if you want to stay local, you got to kind of look through here and say, okay, what entry level or really low stations, entry level stations, can I go to get some experience and still stay close to home? Some people don't care. They'll go out west. They'll go to, I know, students who've went to Idaho, Glendive, Montana. I know a girl who got a job in Glendive, Montana. So if you know, if you want to move and geographically you don't really care, you can just sort of have your pick of these. But I wanted to stay close to home because I had other things I wanted to do, and so I sent my tapes to Zanesville, Ohio, and got hired there, which at the time was I believe it was the smallest market in the entire country at the time. It was 204, and now it's still 204, but there's other stations who obviously started up since then. So everybody's goal in broadcast usually is to get up into this top 20, 25 range. Some people want to go all the way to the top. Me, I'm happy staying here in Pittsburgh. I'm not going anywhere. I have a family. My kids go to William Penn. They're going to be here, forever. We're not moving. And people always say to me, well, don't you want to go? Don't you want to, realize your dream? Don't you want to be in New York or LA? No, I'm happy with Pittsburgh. My family's here. However, I work with people who will do anything to get to the top and to get to number 1 or number 2, which is fine too. And then beyond that, of course, there's the networks. These are just the stations that have local news. So like Fox 5 in New York. We're not talking about like CBS or NBC. I mean, that's big, big time, So once you work in the top 20 or the top 10, you can, you're very likely or very, you have the opportunity to perhaps get a job at one of the big networks. That when you turn on the news, it's, you're looking at Brian Williams. So I have one of these for everybody. I can pass these out later. And let's see what else I wanted to tell you guys. Storytelling. Let's talk a little bit about storytelling, because this is something you guys can use like right away in your classes here. So what I did is I put four real stories on here that we've done on the news in the last couple of weeks. And they're very different. I put a story about a fire, a story about, did you hear the story about the local guy who designed the real Barbie? Yeah, you can have that, sure. And a Steeler story, a sports story, and what we call a hard news story about a standoff, which Pittsburgh is one of those cities that has these things we call standoffs, where some guy with guns like holes himself up in his house and the SWAT team comes and surrounds it, and believe it or not, we don't cover every one that happens because it just happens so darn often. If we hear a standoff on the scanner, if he's holding somebody hostage or there's kids involved or there's somebody in danger, yeah, we'll go cover it. But you would be absolutely shocked at how many times the SWAT team rolls out with all their gear on and surrounds a house because some guy is inside threatening to do something stupid. We don't cover all of those anymore. However, the ones that we do, we do them for a reason. So when we talk about reading stories or telling stories on the news, you're going to read each of those stories very differently, aren't you? Are you going to read them all the same and like the same monotone voice and the same expression? Are you going to tell a fire story like you do a Steeler story? Are you going to tell a story about a Barbie doll the same as you do a standoff? No. And the reason I'm telling you this, because that's one of the biggest challenges that we have when students are coming out of college and into the industry, is they're doing everything the same. They have this picture in their head of what they think a TV journalist should be, and they're telling every story the exact same way, and they're not communicating to the viewer what that story is about. It's okay to use your facial expressions and your emotions. It's okay to do that. I'm probably one of those people who do it a little bit more than others, because not everybody can do that. Not everybody has that in them. It's not natural to do that. For me, as you can probably tell the way I'm talking, I like to use gestures. I like to change my inflection. I like to get people like involved in the story, whether I'm telling a story about city council or whether I'm telling a story about some guy, rescuing kids from a pool, whatever. So this is what I think is very important, that you're going to it's almost like acting. There's a little bit of acting in TV news. And a lot of people don't like us to say that. But you're telling different accounts of different types of stories. So you've got to change the way your face looks and the way your voice is when you tell the stories. Does anyone want to try one of these for us? Anyone want to do, the fire is probably the easiest one, because the fire, the reason I put the fire on here is because it's very straightforward, but there's a little bit of, there's an element of heroism to it, because this guy rescued somebody from the burning building. Anyone want to try to read that? Do you want to hear how I would read it first? Okay. A Brookline man is being called a hero today after rescuing a 4-year-old boy from a burning apartment building. This happened around noon today at the Alfred Arms building on Stanton Street. The boy and his grandmother were trapped on the 9th floor. Maxwell Stenger, who lives in the apartment next door, kicked in the door and brought the two to safety. Investigators say that blaze started in a kitchen on the 2nd floor. So do you see what I did there with those 2 sentences that were about the actual rescue? Do you see how I kind of stopped and paused and inflected when I talked about him kicking the door in and rescuing them? So you as a viewer, of course there's video to go with this, right? So you're watching video, hopefully, of maybe somebody being wheeled out on a stretcher, or some, the firefighters fighting the fire. So as you're looking at that video, which should also be compelling, you're listening to the anchor or the reporter talking about what's happening there. So you have your voice plus the images making that story, and you should give the viewer a feeling about that story. You just don't want them sitting there like this looking at the news. You want them to remember, excuse my voice, that you did a story last night. You as a reporter, did you see that reporter last night tell that story about the guy who rescued the kid? Man, that was really good. And the way she stood there and told us about it. You want them to remember it. And you don't want them to turn the channel, right? So you're going to tell that fire story very differently from the Barbie story. So what might you do? Did anybody read over the Barbie story yet? It's cute. This is true too. A local guy created a real Barbie, like a Barbie that's not like, this waist isn't that big. He modeled it. He did a 3D model on his computer and then actually manufactured a Barbie that is the shape and dimensions of an actual human girl. Which is very cool, and he's a millionaire now all of a sudden, so which is awesome. So you're going to tell that story. You're probably going to smile, right, while you're telling it, which is okay to do. So you would say, you think giving a kid a Barbie doll would give them unrealistic expectations of beauty? Well, you're in luck, because you can now buy a Barbie-type doll that has all of the flaws you and everyone else has, even zits and cellulite. So that's you can have fun with that. Even if you're a guy, it would be even funnier, I think, if a guy read that story. I would assign that to a male anchor to read, for a very specific reason, because it would be funny it would be fun to hear your interpretation of it, and you expect a girl to be reading it, So you're probably gonna remember it more if a guy reads that story, and that's exactly what we did. We had Ken Rice, our main anchor, read that story about the Barbie instead of his co-anchor Susan Copen. And he had fun with it. He loved it. Steelers, you're going to do that with like really high energy and authoritativeness. Even if you're a girl, there's a lot more opportunities for women in the sports broadcasting industry than there was years ago. I would have never had an opportunity to be a sports reporter, but today it's actually quite popular. Still kind of relegated to the sidelines, the pretty girls on the sidelines talking to the players and the coaches and stuff. But even on ESPN, there's female anchors now, and they're getting, their fair share of the anchor desk. So one of you guys want to try the Steelers? No one's going to read for me? We can pick a name. I hate doing that. Nobody wants to try one of these? It doesn't have to be the Steelers. It's hard to compare. Well, yeah, but I've been in the business for 20 years, you guys. It comes naturally to me. What about the standoff? So the standoff, it would be very different, because this is all seriousness. There's no good that came out of this. The guy's in critical condition, and SWAT teams were there all day long, so you're not going to smile, right? You're not going to read it like this with a fake smile. So a man is in critical condition today after a standoff that started Sunday evening and went into the overnight hours at the Avalon Motel. Police with the Avalon, Ohio Township, as well as Allegheny County SWAT team members were called to the motel around 9 o'clock. Crews shut down part of Route 65 in the area of the motel during that standoff. Officers used flashbangs and tear gas to try to flush the guy out. According to police, the standoff ended around 2 o'clock when the man surrendered. That's when they saw the gunshot wounds to the torso. So that one's just very straightforward, very, very kind of serious. And I'm not going to put anybody on the spot. I was hoping someone would volunteer to do one of those. But here, this is what you can take home and practice in front of the mirror. Hold a hairbrush and just start reading, right? And then keep that in mind. You know what else I tell people? So when you have your scripts, and someone told me this years ago, a consultant actually told us this years ago when I was working at my second TV station, which was in my hometown of Wheeling, West Virginia. In the corner, she told us to put, when we were reading our stories before the newscast, in the corner, write a word, an adjective, some kind of word that would trigger you to read that story in a certain way. So for example, the fire, I would maybe write the word hero or happy ending to get your brain to attach yourself to that word so that you would maybe think about that being a hero, or that this is this story had a good ending as you're reading it. Real Barbie, what would that be? Amusing would be a good adjective that I might write there. So you would read it kind of with an amusing sort of attitude. What else? Can you think of another adjective or word that would help you read the Real Barbie story in a certain way? When you heard that story, what's the first thing you thought of? That's amusing. That's cool, funny. The fact that he's a local guy, that's all intriguing, enlightening, hopeful for all of us women who don't look like a darn Barbie doll, right? The Steelers, that's easy. Energy, enthusiasm, competitive, okay? And then standoff, that's what we call a hard news story. So the standoff, kind of like, I don't want to say gloomy, because nobody's really dead, but gloomy, serious, criminal, maybe. It doesn't have to be an adjective, but she would have us write little words down so that when we were going through our scripts and reading them on the news, even though stuff's on the teleprompter, you still have your scripts in front of you, obviously, because God forbid the teleprompter go down and the world comes to an end. But then you're reading your script, so you look down and you see that word. Okay, amusing. So my brain says, okay, read it in an amusing way. So that's just a little trick that you can do with anything, not just news scripts, anything that you're reading that makes you a better communicator and better storyteller. Okay, do you want to see, how much time do we have?
The period ends at what, 1:42?
All right, we have time to show you. I want to show you an example. When you get a job in TV news, you're not just handing over a paper resume, right? Do you guys know what you have to do to get a job? They want to see what you're doing, right? So your resume could be like, oh, this amazing, I interned at Fox News in New York, and I was, Brian Gumbel's personal intern and all this stuff, and it may sound great, but if you don't look good on camera and if you're not compelling on camera, you're not going to get hired. So you do something called a demo reel or a demo tape, which back in the day we had VHS tapes that we would mail out, and then it became DVDs, and now people just email clips, to news directors all over the country. And you want to be in their save pile or their save file on their computer. You don't want to get tossed into a box or deleted, which happens to 80 to 90% of the tapes that they get. So I just wanted to give you an example of an entry-level person going into TV news, what her demo reel would look like. So this is going to be a college student who actually got a job recently. Oh, okay. Yeah, these are short. Now the other good thing is, besides watching TV news, and I can give you guys some websites to look at these, but there are tons of sites that just have news demos on there, so you can see what your competitors are doing in the industry. Okay, so this girl just recently got a job like right off the bat.
The two were then stopped by a silver Toyota Camry and seemed to be giving directions. They then got into the vehicle.
The sheriff's department says this is the suspect they're now looking for. White male, 180 pounds. The attack happened early this morning at this apartment complex. The police are saying that the 3 female victims were attacked from behind by the male suspect. Good morning, everyone. I'm Rosie Woods. We start off this morning with a heartfelt story. Dozens of police officers. In other news, one person is dead after a meth lab exploded just before 5:30 this morning. Troopers have released the name of a pedestrian struck and killed on I-40 Friday. An advocacy group is pushing for LGBT groups to be allowed to march in the Boston St. Patrick's Day Parade.
Police say 10-year-old Justin was last seen walking around this lake with his babysitter on Monday.
They're saying he's very dangerous, so if you do see this man, contact the sheriff's department immediately. Reporting downtown, I'm Rosie Woods. What's this story about? Thanks, Terry. Westbound lanes of Briley Parkway are still closed following the fatal crash that happened earlier this morning. Bob Sheff.
So see how that's like a sample, a sample of all of her work. Now, can you tell that she's brand new? Can you tell that she probably doesn't have a lot of experience? She's good, right? She's good. She's obviously young, so you know she's not a veteran or anything. So she's good. She has potential, which is what news directors are looking for. They don't expect you to be, you know, an Emmy award-winning, you know, newscaster when you get your first job. So they're looking for potential, which after years in the business, I know that girl has potential. What is she not doing that I just told all of you guys to do? Didn't she do every story the same? Every story was sort of read the same. Even though a couple times she smiled a little bit, but if you closed your eyes, it sounded like it could be the same story that she was reading all the way through, right? Because she wasn't changing the way she was telling it. She wasn't using those little trigger words that I told you guys about to change her delivery. So that's the one thing that she's going to have to work on, right? And that's the one thing that her bosses hopefully will tell her that she needs to work on. Hey, you know, sometimes you're going to be doing a story on a fire. Sometimes you're going to be doing a story with Steeler fans who just won the playoffs. You got to do it differently. You can't do them all the same. And I'm going to show you one more now of a person who is a little more seasoned. Do you guys all have to go?
Yeah, we do.
You guys do?
Yeah, we do. You guys do too? What about, you have to go to, so three, the other three, you stay? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, the other, they have a test, so they.
Here, I have business cards. You guys can like link up with me on
Thank you so much.
Facebook and stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Give these to you now.
Thank you.
So I'm going to show you guys one more of somebody who is getting a job in a top 10 market.
Thousands of Arkansans are enjoying their last holiday weekend of the summer, and police are out to make sure it's a safe one. Hello, and thanks for watching. I'm Jeanette Reyes. Well, the kids are back at school, which means they'll be coming home with work to do, and that can be stressful.
And you know, I think that about sums up Riverfest 2013. You know, with perfect weather and that kind of ride, I'm not surprised, Aaron. All we got to do is just bring you out here next year, right?
Scott and Christina, there is a parade going on right now, so they're not here for Bruce Pennington or the meeting tonight, but there is another event, and that is that emergency meeting. I'm told it will be unlike any other. In the words of one official here, he tells me the gloves will come off tonight. And speaking of today's game, fired up fans boarded a bus this morning and headed, of course, to Fayetteville.
Okay, so she's good too, but she did something that the other girl who has less experience didn't do. She changed the way she delivered each and every one of her stories. See how she was just having fun with wherever she was at a carnival or something, talking about, you know, how much fun it was, and telling her co-anchor that he needs to come out there. So I just wanted you guys to see the difference that, you know, experience gives you, but you can still have that at, you know, at this age or at college age. That's one of the things that I always see that really sets people apart in terms of getting a job. Don't do everything, don't say everything, don't tell everything the same. If we have a couple minutes for questions, I can answer like specific questions for you guys too. Do you guys want to know anything that I didn't already talk about?
When you're like in college, like going to school for say like communications, do you specialize in like a certain like,
I'll leave this with you for the other kids.
like type of like report, like say sports or just like regular news or?
Now in college, yeah, they probably will put you into more of a slot because, you know, they have, you know, certain stories that they do on a week-to-week basis. So, for example, you know, we had an entertainment reporter who always did like movie reviews and stuff, social stuff that was going on campus. We had a sports guy, obviously, who just went out and did nothing but sports. So yeah, in college, you're probably going to be a little more compartmentalized, which is good and bad because you're getting experience probably in the exact realm that you want to be in. However, you're not getting experience in all of those other areas that you're going to need when you get a job. Now, sports is one of those things that if you want to be a sports reporter, you're going to be a sports reporter, you know, probably no matter what. You might have to start out like as a general assignments reporter in a smaller market, but you know, sooner or later, if you want to be in sports, you're going to stay in sports and move up in sports. You know, you're not going to go from sports to general assignments, back to sports to weather, and the same thing with weather. So there are specialties. There's the sports guy and the weather guy, right? Who, you know, once you decide that's what you want to do, you usually stay that way. You might start out as a regular like reporter in a small market because you just want to get that first job. But then you want to, if you want to be a meteorologist, you know, you just tell your boss, hey, listen, I really want to do weather. You know, when somebody's off or somebody calls off sick, can I do the weather? Can I do the weather? Can I do the weather? And then from then on, you should be getting a weather job at every station that you move up to. And I keep going like this because it's still like that. You start out small, and then you know you might make a jump to a medium level market, and then make a jump to you know, hopefully the top 10, top 20. The one story that I tell everybody, and the reason I'm telling you this is so that you never say this, we had an intern at KDKA a couple of years ago, and we take the interns out with us on stories. They sit in the back seat, and I always engage them in conversation, ask them, you know, what school they go to, what do you want to do, and we had a very bright girl who wanted to be a TV news reporter, and so I said, you know, do you want to stay close to home? Do you want to, or, you know, do you want to move? Like, where do you see yourself starting out? Which I meant in terms of geography. You know, where do you want to start out? Because I told her, you know, that I stayed close to home. I was never one of those people to just, you know, pack up my bags and head out west. So she said, well, and this is how she talked. I'm not making fun of anybody. She's like, well, I think I'm going to start like in LA. And so she had no idea, this poor girl, that you can't start in LA. You can't. It's the #2 market in the United States. I mean, unless you're like some prodigy that, you know, that comes out looking like a pro, you're not going to start in Los Angeles. And so then I had to explain to her, and she's in her senior year of college, keep in mind. Nobody told her at that university that you can't start in LA. So no matter where I go, I always tell everybody there's a process. There's a process to it. You got to start small. And you might not have to start in the 200s like I did. I mean, I did that because there's stations close to us that are in the 200s. But there's also stations like Clarksburg, West Virginia, Wheeling, West Virginia, who are in like the 120s, 130s, that are, you know, that are great stations to start at. And we see that a lot. And then you move up maybe into the, you know, 80s or 70s or something, and then into the 20s. I made a jump from 137 at the time, 137 to 19. Pittsburgh was 19. That was unheard of at the time, but that's happening more and more. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time and was very, you know, assertive and aggressive and stalking this news director, and sent my tapes and kept improving my tapes because I wanted a job in Pittsburgh. Like that's it. That's all I want to do. I want a job in Pittsburgh, and I got married. I'm here to stay, and I'm not going anywhere. Probably not. So the reason I gave you these, and this is online too, but this is always so enlightening for people to look at. Like if you have a city in mind, This girl here, she went from Little Rock, Arkansas, which I believe is in the 50s. Look in the 50s and see where Little Rock is. She went from Little Rock to Chicago.
Yeah, 56.
56. So she went from 56 to 3, which is pretty darn awesome. The first girl I showed you, she got a job in Market 202, which is what? What's 202? Oh, my glasses. Okay. Alaska?
Oh, wait. 202?
Yeah. Yeah, Fairbanks, that's Alaska, isn't it?
I don't know.
Wow. Okay, so she's in Alaska. She obviously didn't care as she moved to Alaska. But she's the main anchor there. So that's the other thing. So, you know, if you get a main anchor job, if you get an offer as a main anchor job, I don't care where it is, you take it, right? Any other quick questions before I let you guys go?
So you work for KDKA, right?
I work for KDKA, and there's a whole other parts of this I didn't even tell you guys about. I'm part-time at KDKA. I'm one of the few part-timers in the whole market. There's only a few of us who are part-time freelance. So besides KDKA, I do a lot of other things. I do a lot of voiceover work. I do a lot of like commercial type stuff. I do training videos. I produce a lot of, I produced a television show for PBS. So because I'm a freelancer there, I'm not under what's called a personal services contract. Everybody else there, they can't do any of this stuff. Do you know what I mean? So as long as I'm responsible about the choices that I make in other freelance jobs, I work a couple days a week at KDKA, and then every once in a while I'll do other projects. Like I've done work for CNN, MSNBC, Good Morning America, Oprah. When there's a big story in town that, for example, Good Morning America or The Early Show doesn't want to send a full crew to, they'll call me and say, hey, you know, we have this big story in Pittsburgh, can you meet my crew? They'll fly the crew here, the camera guys and the sound guys, and then I'll do the story with them. You won't see me on TV, but I compile everything and still am the reporter, and then I send everything back via satellite. We go to a satellite station downtown and uplink everything to New York, and then they gather it all together there, and one of their reporters there will put it together. So it appears as if that reporter was there doing all that work when really it was me. So, but it's great. It's a great experience, good money, and a little bit of break from the norm. But I get to do that because I'm a freelancer.
And do you write everything that is talked about on the news?
Yeah, so when I'm the fill-in anchor on the weekends too. So this weekend, for example, I'm anchoring. Obviously, I don't write every single story as an anchor. So when you see somebody anchoring the news, chances are they may have written one or two of those stories, but somebody else is writing all of those for them, a writer, a producer, other reporters. As a reporter, however, which is a good question, when you go out and do your story as a reporter, that's all you. You're writing it, you know, from your notes down to what's on TV. Usually you have to, if there's time, you get it approved by one of your superiors, by what we call an executive producer. So you'll email them, okay, here's my script, you know, can you hurry up and look at it so I can track it, so you can do your narration of it. So if there's time, they'll approve it, and you know, it's in this market, once you're in the top 20, is very, you know, there's very seldom do they say change this or change that or don't say this, because usually there's not time, right? Especially in breaking news. So for breaking news, sometimes you don't have any time to write anything. You just get there, you get your mic on, and there's a fire blazing behind you, and all you can do is talk about what you see, right? So what if you get to a fire at 5:50 and you're on the air at 6:01? You don't have time to go gather facts and write. Hopefully you see somebody, you know, a fire chief or somebody crying on the corner there, you know, whose house is up in flames. And you know, are you okay? Is your family okay? Or okay, and then you go on the air and say, I just talked to, you know, the homeowner. Luckily, everybody is out safely. The homeowner is still looking for their dog, we're hearing, as you can see behind me. Flames are still shooting out the windows. Firefighters having a tough time getting a grasp on the blaze. You just talk, which I love. That's like my thing. I love breaking news. For a lot of people, it's hard to, you know, they freak out in that situation. But over time, you learn to do that. You know, you just kind of hone, those are skills that it just kind of comes naturally to you. So if somebody says, well, I don't have any information, like what am I supposed to do? Look around you. You could tell a story about this room right now, right? Without having written anything, correct? I mean, you know, you could tell a story about that tripod sitting there. Anything. It's just looking around and it's your observations. So if you don't have like concrete facts and information, look around you at the facts that are there already presenting themselves. It's fun. I mean, I joke about standing in front of the mirror with a hairbrush. I totally did that for years. I mean, that's what I did. And then I would watch TV and try to be like the people on TV.
The timing part is what I was thinking about. How do you know how long you have? Are you given the parameters?
Yes. So a package, which are the stories that you see on the air, a reporter comes on live and they say, you know, take a look at this story or whatever, and you see the story run, that's called a package. Those are about 1:20. The stories that the anchors read on the air by themselves with no reporter, they're not tossing to a reporter, they're usually, if there's no sound in them, if there's no interviews, those are about 30 seconds. If there's an interview chunk in there, it's 45 seconds. So those are things that you learn in the business, that a package is 1:20, a VO, do you guys use these terms in TV class here? A VO is 20 or 30 seconds. A VOSOT, which is sound on tape, VO, sound on tape, is 45 seconds. So those are kind of basic parameters that are across the board at all television stations. Sometimes for a special report, you'll get 2 minutes, 2:20. If you're like, I have this great sound, you won't believe who I got this exclusive interview, okay, I'll give you 2 minutes. You know, so you can lobby for that extra time, because timing, and that's one thing, timing is so important in TV news, because you can't just go on forever. They have to take their commercial breaks at a specific time, because the advertisers who I told you about at the beginning of our discussion, those advertisers who are paying for time, they paid for a certain time slot. It's not just like, oh, put us on wherever, you know, we're selling Bounty paper towels, whenever you can fit us in. No, they paid for 6:09. Which is the first commercial break at the end of the first block of a 6 p.m. newscast. So sometime between 6:09 and 6:11, the Bounty commercial has to be in that show. Or the station doesn't get paid. Like, they're not going to pay the station. Like, hey, you know, what happened to our commercial? Like, it has to be in there. So timing, that's why as a producer, our producers who stack the show, it's a grid that, you know, looks like that, and every story will be on there, and there's a time. And then the computer will back time for you and show you if you're heavy or light, if you need to add a story in the first block to get to 6:09 or 6:10, if you need to take something away. So all the time in our ears, when I'm anchoring this weekend, I hear in my ear my producer will say, I'm killing A 15, 16, and 17. So you just kind of toss A 15, 16, and 17 away. He'll delete it from the computer, and it's gone, poof. So, you know, unfortunately, people who were waiting to see A16 for some reason, viewers at home, you know, hopefully we'll get it into one of our other newscasts. So there's things that we call kill items, which is, you know, kind of barbaric, but there's certain stories that get killed that hopefully will resurface at some point. But if the reporter goes on, or if the weather guy takes too long, which happens a lot at our place, he'll go over, then the producer has to do something to make up for that time. So they'll kill A15. So yeah, timing is so important. You have to stay, that's why you put a great story together, and you'll get to know, like, I know what 1:15 is on paper. I know when I go in to track something that's going to be like 1:08, 1:15. And then obviously if you look at something it's a little longer than you're used to, you know you're going to have to cut something out. So if you say, hey, this is 1:25, can you give me 1:25? Nope, go cut out 10 seconds. So you got to go back and with your editor and say, okay, cut that soundbite down or get rid of this track. And on a deadline, that's challenging.